Everyone, and thank you for your welcome back. It's so good to see all the faces. I look forward to our time together today. I've been looking forward to it. So let's start with our first theme, which is sitting together. We don't sit to cultivate some special state or as an attempt to gain something we might call enlightenment. We sit in order to take a posture of upright dignity and stillness and take care of our body and our posture as we sit and our breath. Because the light, Buddha's light, the light of wakefulness in us calls us to practice in this way so it can be expressed. Enlightenment is the cause of your practice, not the fruit of your practice. We sit to recognize and open and express this light that calls us to practice. And in which we can have deeper faith over time if we continue to return and take care of our posture and take care of our breath, letting awakening take care of itself. That light which has called us to sit. And life goes on. And our joys and sorrows continue as this light is amplified and brought forth as we practice together. Vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. Wearing the universal teaching, I realize the one true nature, thus harmonizing all being. Vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. Wearing the universal teaching, I realize the one true nature, thus harmonizing all being. Vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. Wearing the universal teaching, I realize the one true nature, thus harmonizing all being. Well, I say welcome back. I don't know if I'm saying that to myself or to all of you. So I'll say it for all of us. I'm so happy to return. And I'm not exactly going to give you a report on what I did on my summer vacation. Um, it's not a report about the details of my so-called, pilgrimage. I guess that's just my personal story. But this personal story sort of contains, what you would expect, I guess, from any real pilgrimage or a retreat. Most of you have been on retreat. And you know what happens in retreat, everything. And so I'm always curious about what people project onto their ideas of practice, but also of this thing that I first called a sabbatical and then reframed as a pilgrimage. It wasn't a pleasant vacation any more than a Zen intensive or a session is a peaceful time of blissful meditation. We think, oh, it'll be that, but it's everything that it is. Um, so what I do want to talk about a bit and reflect on, and then ask you to reflect on for our inquiry is I want to say something about always returning, a very, very essential aspect of practice, to always return. We have lots of stories in our tradition, and most traditions actually have stories of um, having struggles and having to come back, um, to return to the Zendo, or maybe you have experiences in retreat um, which aren't what you expect, as I said, some discouragement or pain or fear or exhaustion, conflict. I know enough of you to know that all of you have experienced those things. Um, in other words, everything that life brings us. And but we still return, we keep coming back. Because this is what practice is actually meant to help us meet. This is what it's for. Those aren't things in the way, those are the way, as we know. And there's the kind of things we meet most intimately on a pilgrimage, which is going out into the world. But then we have to return home to wholesome practices with other dedicated Sangha members and friends like this, and to return again and again, maybe to a relationship with a trusted teacher, even if we have struggles. And if we're willing to return, then we have a chance to discover more freedom from our habitual delusions, maybe a little more spaciousness and a different relationship with a relentlessly changing world, and maybe a little more peaceful life in the midst of everything that it is. There is a possibility if we continue to return, but only if we continue to return. And we're likely, when we return, it's like the Eliot poem, we return and find ourselves in the same place. Life ends up being the same, but with renewed possibilities for choices that are maybe grounded in a bit more wisdom because of our continued practice and return, and infused with a bit more compassion because of our practice of returning. And some of this we talk about when we take refuge in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And the refuge meaning, to fly home, to return to the triple treasure. But I'm talking about something not exactly just taking refuge. We are taking refuge when we return to the Zendo. It's an enactment of that. But when we return to the practice discussion room with our teacher, we are enacting. When we return to helping the Sangha, we're enacting some of those things. By returning to retreat, whenever cycles of retreat again and again, it represents a deepening of commitment and the embodiment of our devotion and an expression of discipline to a path in which we have at least enough faith to continue to return. And every time we do so, every time we return, we deepen that faith, which by our enactment of return over and over and over. And ultimately, returning does something else really important. It encourages other people. And that's our foundational commitment as bodhisattvas, to encourage other people to continue to return. Somebody asked Suzuki Roshi one time, I think they said something like, how can I be a good Zen student? How can I be a really good Zen student? And he said, just keep asking that question. Like, the inquiry is the practice. What is this? What are we doing? Why did I think this was a good idea? And am I actually going to get something from all this effort? So I think I love the question and the answer, because he's basically saying, keep returning. Keep returning. In inquiry, we keep asking our questions over and over, and they're the same questions. As people come and they go, sometimes people show up, sometimes people leave. And we do take refuge because it sustains our effort to take refuge. But I want to make another distinction in this theme of return, since that's kind of what I'm feeling today. And it's part of this emphasis I'm paying on continuing practice. I talked about the going out in August when I was leaving a pilgrimage, which is, definitionally like a sacred journey undertaken for like a spiritual purpose pilgrimage. And it's a transient experience. It doesn't last forever. But it usually, in the various definitions I found, it's about removing the person who's on the pilgrimage from their home environment and identity. You're stepping away from something. And that's why I use that term, because that's what I felt like I was offering myself in taking the month away, is stepping away from my usual identity by my actions, and actually leaving home a little bit, taking some time away. The counterpoint to pilgrimage is odyssey, which is usually defined as a long wandering or voyage marked by many changes of fortune, spiritual wandering or request, But it's not just a journey, it's a journey of return. Odyssey is a journey of return. And the word Odyssey actually comes from the Greek, and the name Odysseus, from Homer's Odyssey. That's where we get the word. Because in it, Odysseus is trying to return home. The whole thing is about coming back. Some of you know this. I'm going to just show it for a second. There's a wonderful um, book, Sailing Home, by Norman Fischer, in which he's using the Odyssey as a Dharma teaching. And it's one of those books, one of the handful of books I've read more than once. And I'm going to, as I often do, I'm going to read a few quotes because I like doing that as a way of teaching. But they're short. And also, many of you can appreciate this. How do you summarize or just say what Norman Fischer says? He says it so well. Why not just read his word? It's kind of hard. It's like, okay, he does it so well. So I'm gonna offer this few lines from a paragraph, and then I'm going to go back and make some comments because I really want us to reflect more deeply on this idea of return. And also, I think it's interesting because the Odyssey is in sort of the Western lexicon of literature rather than Eastern. So for some people, it resonates differently. In fact, Norman starts out, he says, the Odyssey has remained alive for us these thousands of years because its metaphors are so astonishingly true to life. We are Odysseus, having made a mighty effort in our youthful days of bright hope. We eventually become tired out to the point of becoming realistic about our prospects. We realize we're not heroes. Yet we must go on with the journey, seeing it through until the end, even if from time to time we have to stop by the side of the road and weep. Why go on? Because love and loyalty require it. Besides, the emotional pull of home is compelling, no matter what we think of it. We've got to get home. It seems as if there are no other options. So I'll pause there. I'm going to go back. He's saying that the metaphors in this particular old story are enduring because they're so true to our life. They're true to our lives. And it's the same with the Buddha's life. The Buddhist story has been sustained because um, it's so resonant with our own understanding of what it means to be alive. We are Odysseus, we are Buddha, we are those they're archetypal images of what it means to, for example, in the Buddhas, to come from some sort of um, beautiful innocence and to suddenly realize there's illness, old age, and death, and to be compelled to understand what that's about. Just like Odysseus is trying to return home after all of his conquests and meeting difficulty after difficulty, as we do, as we walk each other home. Um, and Norman writes, having made a bright effort in our youthful days, a mighty effort in our youthful days of bright hope. Now, some of you are still youthful, but as I look around, most of us aren't youthful, you know. So we're already to the second part of the sentence, which is we eventually become tired out to the point of becoming realistic about our prospects. That resonates, doesn't it? It's like, oh, okay. This is what I might do and what I'm probably not going to do. And because the next sentence he writes is, we realize we're not heroes yet. And then an extremely important sentence, he says, yeah, we must go on with the journey and see it through until the end, even if from time to time we have to stop by the side of the road and weep. That really touched me. Um, because I felt that a number of times. Um, but we must see it through until the end. Another book I'm going to recommend here, just a side note, is Seeing One Thing Through to the End, which are the teachings Mel Weissman. And Norman says, why go on? Because love and loyalty require it. That's an interesting koan, isn't it? To stay with that sentence. What does love and loyalty require of us? And he says, besides, the emotional pull of home is compelling. No matter what we may think of it, we've got to get home. We have to find who we are. And it seems that there are no other options. Love and loyalty require it. Love of what? Loyalty to what? Those are the questions. And I know that this returning home, we've got to get home. I don't know about you, but I've told the story many times of being in the Zendo at Green Gulch Farm the first time I was ever in a formal Zendo, and it being very exotic and beautiful and strange in lots of ways. And I felt completely like I had found home. How is that? What does that mean? We've got to get home. There are no other options. Sojin, there's the title comes from a time when he asked Suzuki Roshi, what is nirvana? And Suzuki Roshi said, seeing one thing through to the end. Seeing one thing through to the end. Continually returning, coming back, seeing one thing through. So if you go back to these statements by Norman, he says, and this is where I think inquiry comes in and our work together in this way. He says, we think we know who we are and what our lives are about. Ha. But suppose we don't. Suppose our lives are not what we think they are. Suppose something else is going on. And I'll pause. I know a lot of you understand this and have felt this. It's best profoundly what I was feeling during this last month. I thought I knew what I was doing, but it turns out I didn't. Not exactly. He says, suppose something else is going on. Deep streams flowing underground that come to the surface only now and again. And little springs and freshets, like where the snow makes the little, or maybe only a telltale spot of moisture where weeds and scraggly flowers grow. And suppose that the task of our lives is not so much to shape and control our stories. Oh my God, we spend so much time with that, so that they'll turn out according to our preference or preconception, but rather to recognize that our stories, the visible images of our lives, are cover stories, narratives that hide within them deeper, underground narratives that we sense and taste now and again, but never fully comprehend. And I think that's what retreat, that's what sitting zazen, that's what working with a teacher and with each other, of taking time, allows us to really begin to comprehend what's actually here below the habit patterns, below the automatic things, below the storyline, and the stories drop away. We hear that line from Dogen about body and mind dropping away, and it's so strange. But really, when we sit in zazen like we were just doing, and we're still and we're quiet, at least externally, as we take care of our breath and our body and our posture, that's the body and mind that we usually engage dropping away for a minute, so that those little springs can come forward and we can know who we are a little more. And just one last little bit, Norman says, this is the territory of religion and myth, the providence of spiritual practice, but no book, no practice, no community, no scripture, none of that can ensure that things will turn out as you want them to. nor even that you can be sure at any point of where you are or where you're going, which is what I began to feel during the month. The spiritual odyssey is more mysterious than any teaching, any community or mentor can explain, although there are no short of explanations, he says in parentheses. And because the journey takes us back to the beginning, back where we started from, and it's an odd journey, this heartfelt journey of return to ourselves, like that beautiful tiny John O'Donohue poem that I've used a million times in teachings, to come home to yourself. May all that is unforgiven in you be released. May your fears yield their deepest tranquilities. May all that is unlived in you blossom into a future graced with love. It's a blessing. May all that is unforgiven in you be released. During the last month, it seems like what I was doing is over and over facing something and forgiving myself, and facing something else and forgiving myself. Releasing, releasing, more than forgiving even. The second line, may your fears yield their deepest tranquilities. I felt terrible waves of fear and anguish. And staying with it, returning, I have found also the tranquil, releasing depth, the deepest tranquilities underneath those fears. And the last line, may all that is unlived in you blossom into a future graced with love. Taking in the love of my partner and my friends, of you, my students, I could return to being grateful for the blossoming of my life just as it is. And that was a beautiful um, place to return. Just a couple of more sentences here. Um, Norman says, maybe like Odysseus, we're finally ready to return to where we are, to our beauty and strength as well as our limitations. And that's what I was just reflecting on. Maybe we're ready to see what's wanted and needed as what was there all along. Our animal life, our love, our presence. Maybe we're ready finally to become the creatures that our deepest stories and metaphors have always described. Half heavenly, half stupidly earthbound, full of wonder and awe, powerful and vulnerable, everything. And maybe the point of life's journey, our spiritual odyssey, is not conquest and perfection, whether spiritual or worldly, but rather the simple transformation into what we've been all along, flesh and blood people in a flesh and blood world, feeling what people feel and doing what people do, returning home to what we are. And then he asks a question, could this be enough? And I think that was probably the question that I ended up with after a month. This is the question I just kept returning to again and again. Could this be enough? Am I enough? Have I done enough? And what is enough anyway? Probably some of you remember the question I've repeated again and again that John Gladfelter, my therapy mentor, said to me so many times. When I ask a question, he said, that's such a good question, I'd be ashamed to answer it. These are the questions that we come back to. This is Suzuki Roshin's. Just keep asking that question. Just keep asking that question. Just keep returning so that we realize that where we are and who we are is the full manifestation of ultimate reality. And it looks like this. And if we're still and we're quiet and zazen over and over, we continue to return. That light, which is calling us to practice, not the light that we seek, the light that's calling us to practice can shine forward. And we realize, like Joel was talking about last week from Joan Sutherland's work, enlightenment, everything is enlightenment. She, again, is one of those writers that's hard to summarize because she's so beautiful in her words. She says, enlightenment is our true nature in our home, which is exactly what I'm talking about. But the complexities of human life cause us to forget. So sometimes, we have to come back to our practice. We have to come back to retreat, come back to each other. And there are ways in which we get in our own way, but she says it's possible to dismantle the structures that exile us so we can return from an exile that's always been illusory to a home, return home, that was always right under our feet. She said, it concludes, for many of us, there's something pushing us and something pulling us toward homecoming, like I feel today. We're pushed by our own pain and the pain we see in the world around us. We're pulled by intimations. We're pulled by intimations of something larger and truer than our ordinary self-oriented ways of experiencing life. It's possible to make ourselves available. This is our practice. It's possible to make ourselves available in all the hours of our days to the grace we so long to be touched by, and to spread that grace to the world around us. It's possible to make ourselves available if we sit still and silently together, so that in all the other days of and hours of our days, we're available to the grace that we're longing for, and to spread that grace to the world around us, which is the Bodhisattva's vow. This is our practice. And this is our work in the world. And this is what calls us to always, always return. So what calls you? Or what are the barriers in the way? What are the questions that you want to return to? What's it like to consider this? Always return, always return. I was sitting in the hot baths at Tassajara one time with another teacher, and we were talking about sanghas, and this teacher said in a sort of a little bit of a sardonic way, but it was it was true, of course, too, and a little despairing. Talking about sangha, he said, they come and they go. Mostly they go. Because there's a little heartbreaking about the difficulty of continuing to come back. All of you, my long-term students, too, I see people who have come back for years and years and years. And I know of the difficulties that you've been in, and you know of some of the difficulties I've been in. And that's the ground for the continuation and sharing of the grace that I'm talking about. What do you want to talk about?
Cassie.
Someone who's returned over and over and over and over.
So I wrote down a couple of things of enlightenment as the cause of meditation, not a goal.
Not the fruit.
And yeah, very, very different. And rings like so true. And that light, like I've always thought about the light being out there. I've never really thought about the light, the light that's here coming forward.
This little light of mine.
Yeah, I'm gonna let it shine. Oh, that takes me down to other tangents that I don't want to get to.
Sorry. Couldn't help it.
Right, of course. And so the other week from something, we was into this Dharma talk, and the thing that came up was sitting as Buddhahood.
Yes.
And That struck me so much that it's been a post-it note on my screen since.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. And like, so I talked about like the internal dialogue when I come to sit, and it might be a list, it might be, beliefs, all those different things. And my reaction to them is usually with judgment, not compassion. And what you were pointing to here and that particular phrase like has changed the experience for me, because I'm not like, it's not like sit as Buddha, become Buddha. It's like sit as the spaciousness of all things
That's right.
is
Right. Because
really.
you don't have to meet all that stuff in you with judgment to fix it. And you don't have to actually meet all that stuff with compassion. Just maintain your posture, follow your breath, leave it alone so that the light can come forward and do its work. Have
Oh, so I guess
confidence.
there's like an anxiousness that wants to control something.
Yes. And we can go either in the grasping or the aversion side. Compassion will automatically flow if you leave it alone. If you just keep coming back, keep returning to just sitting. It does not feel very satisfying. It's not very sexy. There's not any great thing that's happening. It's kind of boring. But that willingness to return breath after breath, come home breath after breath, minute after long, painful minute of sitting, that's returning. Something happens that you can't do, but it's an expression and an opening to what's always and already true.
As we sit here with this and as a closing statement, there's one time we were talking, another time we were like in the Zendo talking about sitting posture. And I said that I tend to lean and go down. And you gently, you know, came back to center. And that's an embodied reminder for me all the time.
That's right.
Like I feel that moment a bunch.
Put your energy into that, not trying to make your mind stop or your heart open, or just make it simple and in your body. Be present. Keep coming home, coming home, coming home to Buddhahood, to light.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Flint.
Hi there.
Hi. So when you were talking about returning, I was thinking of returning from distraction during zazen, just returning to the breath, and also returning to the present moment.
Mm-hmm.
And then you said something at the end there about the longing to return to the grace of home or something like that. And what I was wondering is whether maybe embarrassment or shame about the longing might be something that gets in the way of, or encourages the distraction and gets in the way of experiencing home.
Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We have you have a lot of insight because of your training and experience, and you have a lot of skill in noticing these nuanced cover stories.
Speaking of which, I had a funny thought when you were talking about the stories that cover
Mm-hmm.
home. And
Yeah.
remember the old album covers, wonderful, the 33s with gorgeous artwork and the story, and comparing that to the experience of putting it on the turntable
Mm-hmm.
and experiencing the music.
Music move through you.
Yeah. And there you have the whole, so I was thinking that's kind of what we do. We create this packaging.
That's right. And if we get too enchanted with trying to figure all that out, and we think what practice is going to do for us is give us just a better way to figure all that out, but it doesn't.
Yeah, that's huge.
It
To
is.
to just
Absolutely.
um, keep. The other thing about the returning is accepting the going. That
Yes, that's right.
that's how it goes, and that's oh, and then that's
Inhale, exhale.
yeah,
Inhale, exhale. Coming, going.
yeah. How we do that, how we return, our own quality of returning.
How simple are you willing to let this be? Just breathe.
Thank you. Thank
Welcome.
you so
Thank
much.
you.
We have Leah.
Hi, Flint.
Hey, Leah. Are you feeling better?
Um, no, I mean, sort of a little bit.
Yeah, it's still
Um,
your little illness though.
yeah, and it's been interesting because, you know, it's exactly what I needed. It's been, I think, 2 weeks or 3 weeks now.
Hmm.
I've had this cough and haven't been able to sleep. So
Mm.
every day I'd show up to my desk trying to get work done. And every day I'm like, at the end of the day, just it's a process of giving in and giving up
Hmm. Yep.
on that
Surrendering to your actual life.
surrendering. Yes, that's the right word. Um, and so many things you said today really strike a chord for me. Because I think today's the first day that I like finally surrendered.
Mm.
So instead of, I had this to-do list, it's been neglected. And this morning I was like, oh, I slept 5 hours last night. I have energy to do something. So I was like, already, and then I woke up, and after my daughter went to school, I sat down and I was like, I can't. So instead, I listened to an hour of an interview with Elizabeth Gilbert.
Mm.
And a number of things that she said was just like touching on this longing that I have. And I
Mm.
just cried and cried and cried.
Yeah, you were stopping by the side of the road and weeping.
Yes. So it's exactly that. And so when we were, starting with our meditation, and I just dropped my heart.
Mhm.
And this part came in and it was like strategizing, thinking about um, something with work. And I noticed it and I was like, oh my God, you've been there all this time. And I've never said thank you.
Ah,
Um, so everything you said today was just like, oh my God, this is my this is my
mhm.
experience,
I was doing it just for you, Leah.
and so deep in it today, and seeing the one thing through to the end just couldn't resonate more. Um, but not, I have to give this part thanks, but at the same time, that's not how we're going to do it.
That's
It's not
right. It's
all.
important to be grateful for all of the parts that have helped us and will continue to help us.
Mhm.
And in doing so, they can sometimes rest so they don't try to lead. We can let our true self come forward.
Mhm. So thank you.
Yeah,
The
I
teaching
also
was
am
very
appreciating
nourishing
how
for
some of
me
these
today.
things are falling into place for you on their own because of the practice. I,
Mhm.
I used to, as you know, teach in a situation where we were teaching mainly physicians and medical personnel around cancer, and you know,
Mhm.
and one of the things that we would talk to the medical folks about when we talked about meditation. We said, illness is Western society's only form of meditation.
Yeah.
It's the only thing that stops us in our tracks. And we're prevented from doing what we think. And so it sometimes is maybe physically difficult, but it's psychologically and spiritually challenging too sometimes. But that's the edge where transformation can occur, which is what you're expressing really beautifully.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank
So
you.
grateful for you and all that's available.
Yeah, let's keep returning.
Thank you.
Lisa.
Hi, Flint. Hi, everyone. Oh, so this landed in a lot of ways for me. Sometimes I think about what I'd like to leave my daughters when I'm gone because I hope they outlive me. And, something simple that reflects my core. And one of the things I often think about lately is the Quaker song, turning, turning, spin, spin. I can't remember it now. I had it in my head, but until it's like your heart's delight, spin, spin until you come out right. You land where you're meant to be. And that's within me. I mean, I can almost feel it. I can almost feel that turning. And it's a very visceral thing. And I also kind of have, I guess you can say it's a part, but it's a gyroscope. It's a gyroscope that tips and turns and moves at different speeds, but it always, comes out right. It always comes upright.
That's a little bit like Cassie was talking about. You find your center. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So those are powerful images for me. And also, I certainly am aware of the things that, Rosemary referred to. It's like, oh, over the years, it's like vulnerability. The vulnerability, and sometimes shame of like needing this practice. And if I keep returning and showing up, wow, there's a part that feels weepy. Everybody can see my neediness and vulnerability just because I keep coming back and keep coming back.
That's one of the things I've appreciated about you most, Lisa. How long have we known each other?
Well, I think it's 17 years. There's a little cadre of us who started, back then when Akamada began.
That's a long time. And we started at Seton Cove, I think, maybe.
At Seton Cove, January, when I moved to Austin, 2005, my friend Jazz said, hey, there's this guy I think you'd like. Would you come to Seton Cove with me? And
This January in a few months, that's 20 years.
Well,
2005.
that was before Apamata. I never thought about it like that. But
So the reason I'm saying it, Lisa, is because you've continued to return and you've continued to seek me out, even though mostly what you just said, there are times when you felt confused, ashamed, vulnerable because of all the stuff that was showing, but you didn't stop coming. Even when you almost died, you kept coming back.
Yeah.
And so I just want to acknowledge that because the theme of today, always return, you have demonstrated even against times when you would even say it to me. Why do I keep coming back? I think you're not going to want to see me and I'm too much, you would say all that stuff. But you kept coming and I kept welcoming you and we kept meeting it.
And I can barely, in my body, I can barely imagine the person I was then because I had such tremendous hindrances. The image I carried with me for years, I used to collect insects when I was a preteen. And there's an insect, it's like a litter bug, it camouflages itself with layers and layers. It keeps collecting all these layers of leaves and twigs. And I mean, that was a powerful image, that it was a message to me. And
Light
you know,
inside of that wanted something, kept being called out. There's something more. I know there must be something more. And you would risk the exposure and risk the shame and risk the discomfort so that who you became was who you actually are, who you were, but it came out. So I'm just acknowledging that and want you to feel hopefully some gratitude.
oh,
That's
well, that,
for your own
that,
return.
thank you. That's huge. You mentioned risk. And, it was so terrifying to drop all those layers of protection.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So
So,
now we're at the end of our time for today. So let's chant the 4 practice principles as the way to remember and to encourage our practice in this direction. And thank you for today doing what you've done for the last 20 years, is be vulnerable and encourage other people in doing so. Caught in the self-centered dream, only suffering. Holding to self-centered thoughts, exactly the dream. Each moment, life as it is, the only teacher, being just this moment, compassion's way. Caught in the self-centered dream, only suffering. Holding to self-centered thoughts, exactly the dream. Each moment, life as it is, the only teacher, being just this moment, compassion's way. Caught in the self-centered dream, only suffering. Holding to self-centered thoughts, exactly the dream. Each moment, life as it is, the only teacher, being just this moment, compassion's way. Welcome home.
Well, thank you so much, Flint, and everybody here for just coming here and encouraging each other just to come back home, just to keep returning. And it's what supports me to return is all of you. So thank you so much. Thank you. And it makes me quite emotional to say that, but I really mean it. Thank you. And if you'd like to offer dana to Flint and to Appamada, because everything you offer, all this is solely supported through your generosity and through your turning up. It's how it all happens. And please do go to appamada.org/contribute and you'll find a place to offer dana there. But thank you all so much. And if you'd like to join me for a further 30 minutes, pop yourself into gallery view and I'll be with you in just a moment. Thank you again, everybody. Thank you.